Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about transgender oppression and the suicide rates that coincide with it. So first we are going to talk about vocabulary, uh, and then people affected by transgender oppression, statistics and facts, transitioning, benefit factors and risk factors, trans youth, and the NASW Code of Ethics. So for vocabulary, um, transgender refers to a person whose gender does not match the sex they were assigned at birth. This oftentimes gets thrown around interchangeably with transsexual, which is not true to how they would like to be preferred as. Transsexual is more specific to the medical changes, such as injections, hormones, and surgeries that help alter their anatomy and appearance to more closely align with their gender identity. Gender identity refers to a person's core sense of self as a boy, girl, or man or woman. Gender dysphoria refers to a strong sense of discomfort or unhappiness about one's gender identity. Most people get diagnosed with gender dysphoria just because they need, because it helps them be able to get the hormones and surgeries in the healthcare. Transphobia is an irrational fear of, aversion to, or discrimination against people whose gendered identities, appearances, or behaviors deviate from societal norms. Transmisogyny targets transgender and transsexual women. So these are people who were assigned male at birth but identify as women. Uh, Also, for transgender, alternate terms that are okay to say are non-binary, genderqueer, and gender fluid. And those can be found in the book on page 394. Transmisogyny refers to whenever a trans person is ridiculed or dismissed for failing to live up to gender norms and for their expressions of femaleness or femininity. Okay, so according to a 2017 Gallup poll, 4.5% of adult Americans identified as LGBT, with 5.1 of the women in the United States identifying as LGBT, compared to 3.9% were only men. Approximately 0.5 to 0.6 of the population identify as transgender, which may seem like a really small amount, but I think when I looked it up, it was roughly about 1.6 million people. Transgender people face unique stressors and higher rates of discrimination, which can result in a poor mental health, and that could be with for greater risk for suicide. The exact number of trans people who die by suicide is hard to pinpoint because gender identity is not recorded on death certificates, so we can't really exactly pinpoint who it was that died of what cause. So here are some statistics and facts. Approximately 0.5% of the population is transgender, as I've already stated. Over 10% of the transgender population report recently attempting suicide within just the previous year. And it does say attempt suicide, not just think about or try. It's actually just like attempting suicide. Trans people are 2 times more likely to think or attempt about suicide than even gay, lesbian, or bisexuals, and I believe 5 times more likely than heterosexuals. 22% to 43% of transgender people have attempted suicide in their lifetime. And 2 out of 3 of trans youth report recent self-harm within the previous year. So 2/3 is a really high amount of trans youth that are hurting themselves. So I believe that we need to try to cut this down as much as possible, and I will talk about that later in my next few slides. Okay, a few more statistics and facts. Approximately 1 in 5 transsexuals report being refused medical care that they need. This can coincide with medical care that helps them transition, like the injections of hormones and surgeries, but it can also mean just any medical care that they need, and they're being refused just because of their sexual orientation. 78% experience harassment in the K through 12 setting, and 27 states lack explicit legal protections. And I will talk more on that on the next slide. So here is a state map, and on this map in the gray, it shows states that have no non-discriminatory protections. And as you can see, Missouri and almost all of its surrounding states don't have any of these protections. And I believe that we need to fix this, but we are in the Bible Belt, and that is a very hard thing to do. These states in the navy blue and the light blue have a few protections, but not all. I hope to see more of the gray states transition into the blues, but we will see in the next few generations. In the states in the red have full LGBT non-discrimination protections, and these states, their laws are protecting people from discrimination on basis of sexual orientation or gender identity in employment, housing, and public accommodations. And so that can mean bathrooms and campus housing, and there is a relationship between denial of access to bathrooms and gender appropriate campus housing and an increase in risk for suicide. Okay, so transitioning. So there are beneficial factors and there are risk factors for both. 67% of transitioning people thought about suicide before transitioning, but only 3% thought about suicide more after their transition. So this is a really dramatic effect between the two different ones. So it's a really good thing for them to finish their transition, but it takes a lot to get there. Supportive and strong relationships, pride in one's own gender identity, and connections to trans community all have a really big effect on their mental state and their physical state as well. Adding in all of these into a transitioning transgender really helps their mental state, and it just really helps them to have more self-confidence and have a happier life in general. Some of the risk factors are lack of support, distress, bullying, homelessness, um, discrimination in the form of physical or verbal harassment, physical or sexual assault, and also mental illness. Um, Mental illness is a big thing because of depression and anxiety. They're pretty common in the transgender, in the LGBT community in general, um, because they are so segregated and uh, misheard that they feel that they aren't ever going to be heard, and that does cause this depression. And I believe that if we give them more of a voice and if they are allowed that voice to be heard, then it will lessen the mental illness and honestly all of the risk factors if we just allow it to be. Trans youth, about 30% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ, compared to 5 to 10% of the non-homeless youth. This is reason because so many of these trans youth have run away because of family rejection or forced out by family rejection, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse at home, aged out of the foster care system, or financial or emotional neglect from family. So all of these can be really big factors in why these trans youth leave their homes or are kicked out of their homes and need a new place to stay or live. Schools also play a large role in ending transgender harassment and discrimination. Uh, as we can see in most of the schools up in Canada, they have placed policies and programs specifically addressing transphobia. Harassment of LGBTQ students is reduced, and in the instance of harassment, LGBTQ students are more likely to report this harassment to school staff, and the staff is more likely to intervene. This is something we don't have here in the United States and would be a huge increase in the way we view our students. Because right now, if a LGBTQ student experiences that harassment, even if they do speak up, which is hard for them, they're probably not, the school staff isn't even probably going to listen or have to be able to do anything for them. So it's nice to see that they actually have these policies and programs in effect. And hopefully we can maybe get those here in the United States. So the NASW Code of Ethics that I saw were violated were dignity and worth of a person and competence. Dignity and worth of a person, I think that no one should be afraid to be who they are and be heard and to speak about what they want and what they need, and we shouldn't deny them those needs based on anything, on color, sexual orientation, anything. We should just let each other be who we are. Competence, I think that really any profession should just be trained. Some of the professions that really do need to be trained are, of course, social workers, anybody in the court system or the healthcare system really needs to be informed about these things. They should be trained in gender diversity, definitions, and trans health. I think that this should become a part of their required curriculum. Staff on all of these should be trained on issues relating to LGBTQ youth culture, terminology, needs, homophobia, and transphobia. And I think right now it's not that they don't necessarily want these children and these and trans people to really strive. It's just that they aren't informed on what to do and what to do whenever they come into that situation. And so here are my resources. The first one is my main source, and then on down. And thank you for watching today. Bye.